Welcome to the No Line Podcast, the podcast dedicated to responsible gaming. Hosted by Philip Beer. No Line is the podcast where all bets are even. We play no favorites. The best bet is the responsible one. Here's our host, Philip Beer.
Hello and welcome. I'm Philip Beer, host of the No Line Podcast, the podcast dedicated to responsible gaming. Today's guest is Jennifer Roberts. She is WynnBET General Counsel and Vice President. During this episode, Jennifer talks about how technology can influence responsible gaming. September is Responsible Gaming Month, which means we are featuring a series of podcasts about responsible gaming, including past episodes that were top downloads. This is a replay of a popular past episode. So here we go again. Jennifer, welcome. I provided a short intro to you. If you could please share more about your background and your experience.
Sure. I'm the Associate Director of the International Center for Gaming Regulation, which focuses on education, research, and development of best practices in gambling regulation. We're a new center. We're only about 3 years old, but we've done a lot in the space, especially as sports betting is expanding, and we do a lot of research on gambling regulation, which really hasn't been done before. It's kind of a neglected area. I also teach gaming law at the Boyd School of Law and University of Utah School of Law, and I was in private practice for 15 years and worked with a lot of sports betting companies, casino operators, and small gaming operators on a variety of gaming regulatory and licensing and compliance issues.
So Jennifer, it's great to have you here. And today we're talking about responsible gambling and more specifically, how technology interfaces or influences responsible gambling. Can you tell us more about this topic?
Yeah, and thanks for having me. I appreciate it. One thing that I focused on my study of gambling and gambling regulation is that we're now seeing kind of a new generation of gambling with modern technology. It's mobile platforms, it's interactive platforms, and with that, we now need to have responsible gambling measures implemented within those technological platforms. And so what I've seen is that, in comparing what happens in a traditional land-based casino, I can walk into a casino and sit at a slot machine and put in, a few $100s, and no one asks me a question. If I don't have a rewards card, I'm just an anonymous player. But one of the advantages of having technology as a platform for gambling is that you actually are required to submit information about yourself, and you're required to go through background review, and the operators are do more due diligence on each player. So there's added protections in that way. And what we've also seen is that a lot of states are looking at having more protections as far as looking at and evaluating your play history. So if I walk into a casino and say, hey, tell me all the times and amounts I've wagered at the blackjack table, they're not going to have that documentation. But I can request that on, my sports betting history. I can get how much I've wagered, how frequently, and often states are now looking at measures as far as restricting how much you can wager or how frequently, maybe put in some added controls on my behavior and patterns with the mobile platform.
So with technology, it is allowing, it's making it possible to implement more responsible gambling measures. What were these measures before technology?
Well, again, it almost depended on the casino. So if I walk into a Nevada casino, then, for example, the responsible gambling requirements by regulation are that, they have to provide a source of information. So you see those brochures that are placed at certain locations, like with the ATMs or near ATMs or gaming areas or the casino cage. So that's a requirement. There's also a requirement that if I went up to the casino cage and said, I want to be on an exclusion list. Don't allow me to cash checks and don't issue me credit. That is a regulatory opportunity or requirement. And then finally, I could put myself on an exclusion list to not receive marketing materials and promotions from the casino. But that's it as far as a regulatory standpoint. So I know a lot of casinos in Nevada do take extra measures. There is a requirement that you have a compliance program for responsible gambling and you do training. But there are other, proactive measures that casinos are taking now in the land-based environment, and that's even translating a lot to the technology side of things, as far as the messaging required, putting restrictions on your play, and limiting yourself as far as credit.
You are part of many conversations in regard to responsible gambling. However, your real focus is on regulation and law. But with that said, in the conversations that you're hearing, are there any legal issues surrounding the monitoring that's being done to the customer in regard to responsible gambling?
I haven't heard of any legal privacy issues. I think that would be a concern if they were doing it without knowledge or consent. You see those kind of programs like in Singapore, where a family member can actually exclude you from participating in gambling. But I haven't seen any legal issues as far as exclusion, other than, some states have exclusion lists that are, they can be from 1 to 5 to, lifetime, and 1 to 5 years or lifetime. And some people are coming back and appealing that decision. For example, I heard of one recently in New Jersey where someone that had excluded themselves from the casinos actually petitioned to remove their exclusion and be taken from that exclusion list so they could engage in sports betting. So there are those kind of legal petition processes, but as far as having any privacy issues, I'm not really aware of any in that space. I think another big legal issue right now is the gambling diversion court that we see in Nevada. That's a pretty exciting opportunity for those with gambling addictions to not have their conviction upheld as so long as they pursue treatment and help resolve their legal issues through kind of that process.
What kind of legal issues does a customer face if they're violating the responsible gambling?
Okay, so the program is kind of, it's like a diversion program, meaning that, okay, you engaged in this behavior, you've been diagnosed with a gambling addiction, that gambling addiction appears to have influenced your behavior. So now we will not prosecute you on this crime so long as you seek treatment and you meet, certain conditions, either, continue treatment, you stay drug free, there's might be certain reporting, but as long as you satisfy those conditions, then the conviction doesn't get entered into your record. It actually goes away, and meanwhile, you also are getting treatment for your gambling addiction. So I think it kind of benefits both sides for people who have struggled with gambling addiction to resolve the legal matters that have been triggered by that. And you see that in other courts. You have drug court, you have veterans court, you have certain programs within courts to help people that are struggling. And we're seeing that gambling addiction court taking off here in Nevada.
In regard to technology and responsible gambling, how close are we to being able to see patterns or predictive analytics in regard to flagging one who may have a problem with gambling?
Yeah, and I know those are discussions that are being made, and the technology is there as far as monitoring gambling patterns. I know Macau is talking about using technology to identify certain gambling behaviors and in customers, whether that's to identify problem gambling or whether that's to identify for marketing purposes. But I think you're going to see a lot more kind of AI, behavior tracking technology used by not only casinos and gambling businesses, but other types of businesses. You kind of already see it with, social media when you're walking by a certain location and it alerts you that, hey, you're near this restaurant, why don't you go in? I think we're going to start seeing those more and more, and that technology can ultimately help with restricting someone that might be prone to gambling behavior. But again, gambling addiction is a medical issue, and so there's just has to be caution in identifying someone as a problem or addicted gambler when that's not really in the medical realm of a casino manager.
And responsible gambling has always been a part of the conversation, but it seems like it's even a bigger part of the conversation lately. Why do you think that is?
I just think we're continuing to see an expansion of gambling. Now especially in the United States, with sports betting expanding, we now have 10 states on board. We have 45 states with lottery. We have 40 states that have some form of casino, whether it's tribal or commercial casino. So the continued acceptance and expansion of gambling, I think it's now we're starting to see, the issues that have to be, addressed with that, and the more responsible gambling messaging, and people are understanding that research and treatment is crucial to help with these issues. I think that's where you're seeing this being part of the larger conversation.
What do you feel is missing from the conversation at the moment?
I don't know that there's anything missing in the conversation. I just think the conversation needs to continue. I will say that, in so much discussion about sports betting, I think that there needs to continue to be the message out there, and I think it gets lost in some of the sources that I see, that there is a responsible gambling component to this form of activity. And, I just think that is getting a little lost while we try to grapple with, let's making sure it's a transparent, legal, regulated system. So I just think the conversations need to still be highlighted, and that's probably always going to be there. Think that, it's exciting actually to see that there's proactive measures being taken by operators to address problem gambling. We're seeing, continued focus from, the National Council on Problem Gambling and Nevada Council on Problem Gambling for continued initiatives to focus on research and treatment in this space. So with the new gambling court, it's great to see those actions being taken and discussed. And I just think those conversations still need to be had, especially when, countries like Japan are looking to what are we doing about this issue, especially as we see new forms of gaming expand. We need to set the kind of standard and be a role model for jurisdictions that are still looking at continuing to develop their regulatory system.
Thanks for listening to the No Line Podcast, hosted by Philip Beer. For a complete list of past episodes, visit iTunes or www.nolinepodcast.com. That's www.nolinepodcast.com. Interested in being a guest on the No Line Podcast or sharing your organization's responsible gaming story? Send an email to philip@nolinemedia.com. The No Line Podcast is committed to responsible gaming. The No Line Podcast is a Philip James Media production.